The Tengyin V3 is a very stable cube with a soft and smooth feel. It's rather quiet during normal turning, but it can get a bit loud during corner cuts. And overall, my 3D printer is actively printing stuff in some parts of the video, and the Tengyin V3 sound is quiet enough to almost get drowned out by the internal fans cooling the printer. It is a very enjoyable cube to use and it is fairly reliable. I've also put in some Dignitas Weight 3 and Speedy to augment its soft feel. It slowed down the cube a bit at first, but doing a bunch of solves sufficiently speeds it up to a speed that I actually enjoy. I won't be discussing mechanism in one isolated section like I do in other videos. Instead, there are three main elements to the cube's mechanism, which I'm going to call the cuts, the core, and the magnets, which all influence the performance in rather specific ways, and I'm going to mix the mechanism and performance components of this review together, but they'll be separated according to the three components. So first, I'll be going into the cuts. By cuts, I mean these kinds of lines, which are used to cut up a solid cube into all of its subsequent pieces. And the overall cuts of this cube just looks a lot like a Moyi Weilong. Although if you really want to argue, 2013 Weilong is basically a proportion change of the 2012 Zanshi. But with that digression aside, the Tengyin V3 has the characteristic cut of most modern Weilong designs, which involve a straighter and much more angular bulge than the older designs. This bulge is involved in the second layer where it cuts into the first layer territory and then it goes back. You can see the same cut line on the center, bulges out like that, and then it goes back in and then it extends straight outwards. One extra feature of the Tengyin cuts is that it actually has an extra lip found at the lower part of the corner base. This technically can be argued to be a double anchor if you really want to stretch the definition of what that is and officially classify this as more of an Aolong cut than a Weilong cut. But that's really stretching the definition since the top anchor here is really big, and then the bottom anchor is just a small lip on top, and then beneath that is just a torpedo, which nothing special to say. The cube also sports an anti-stick design, which I've not really seen elsewhere before, but I don't really care too much about that. I owe my understanding of this cube's magnet system to Yi Gai Mofang, a user on Bilibili. And he says that there are two magnetic circuits in the cube. The first one is just your regular edge corner magnets, except that the magnet is pushed all the way close to the tip. This means that there's only a really small range of angles at which you can feel attraction from this particular circuit, and combined with the principle of moments where a larger distance from the center of rotation multiplied by the same force would give you more momentum, and in this case it's more of an anti-momentum, or like the stopping power the cube has. So this gives the cube a harder snap. Generally, I'm not a fan of harsh snaps when it comes to bigger cubes. I very much prefer a softer and more fluid feel, but for 3x3 it just works. I still find quite a lot of value in the Meilong 3 and the maglev Purple edition of the Super RS3. I still think that they're highly reliable TPS spammable cubes and they don't really slow down my turning that much. And the Meilong still holds my PB, and the Super RS3 is something I almost considered using in NTU Welcome 2023. Of course, there are also people who like the harsh snaps to begin with, so if you're one of those people, this cube is going to be a go-to cube for you. The second magnet circuit is located in the bulging parts of the Weilong cuts. This pairs up with another magnet that's inside the corner stock. I did not take apart the corner at all because it's firstly designed not to be taken apart, and there's most likely a complicated mechanism inside the corner that I'll explain later. Imagine this are the edge magnets and the corner stock magnet. There's actually a gear system inside the corner that progressively misalign the two magnets the more you weaken the magnet setting. So the strongest setting is going to be the most aligned, and then tweaking it to a weaker setting would cause the magnets to be more misaligned and therefore weaken the attraction, because the distance between the attracting points, which are the poles, is going to be larger. This pretty much accounts for the cube's magnet adjustments. That's why the corner has a mechanism inside, which unfortunately I can't really explore, but you have a gear here that would change the strength, which is the height of that magnet inside the corner stock. Additionally, one single corner stock magnet is going to attract the three edges. This means that turning this gear once is going to take care of three different attractions. And with only 8 corners in the cube, this means that there's only 8 gears to turn. The available settings are marked out with a minus, which is the weaker setting, 3 dots, and then a plus, which is the stronger setting, and I just set the whole cube to minus because I just feel that the cube is too snappy for me, and this helps to minimize the strength of the snap, which best suits my turning style. But at first glance you may think, isn't minus dot 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 plus just blatantly copying the Tornado V3? The answer is, it's just superficial. It's a totally different system altogether, because if Taiyan had really copied the Tornado V3 but transplanted the magnet adjustment gears onto the corners, you would have 24 gears in total, but like how I explained in the alignment system, you only have 8 gears, so 2 of those axes you don't see any gears at all. And only on one axis do you actually find all 8 of the gears. Finally, we have the core, which this is where I really start to dislike the cube. So the actual core itself looks like a gun core from some of the older generations, which I actually don't take any issue with. If anything, it's probably a move to lighten the cube and not use screws, much like an actual gun core, which is something that I do appreciate. However, the thing that I really don't enjoy lies up here at the tip of each core arm, which is none other than the tensioning system. I do find it a little bit annoying. The cube comes fitted with what effectively is the Gun XS variant of the GES nuts. The nut is made of 2 clear plastic pieces and a spring, as well as a coloured piece which can be white, green or orange depending on the strength. And this is a compression gear that sits on top. So I've only got the nuts with the white compression gear because I didn't want to break open a new packaging, so I just borrowed one of the stock cubes that CubeWorks has on the shelves. So how the tensioning system works is basically you can take out the nuts by pushing on the nuts and turning it. And this is how you swap the nuts. With the full set, a tool comes with it, but since I didn't, I just borrowed a stock cube. How I adjust the tension is I just use this pair of pliers that come with my 3D printer, and they just fit nicely. I don't compress it or damage the cube or anything. I just put it here and you should be able to turn and change the setting. The compression setting is actually attached to the top one of the 2 plastic pieces. You set it to a higher setting, it actually pushes the top piece down and achieves the same effect as just tightening a normal screw down. While in comparison, the RS3's gear system is actually a cup that goes all the way to the bottom of the screw, and turning this gear, which I don't want to turn right now, would actually raise the bottom. So this compresses the spring from the bottom, while tightening the screw would compress the spring from the top. And here, there's no way to compress the spring from the bottom, but turning the gear would compress the spring from the top. And instead of compressing from the bottom, you have different sets of springs to swap to. And generally, I'm not a fan of using a gear compressor to compress the spring from the top. I'd rather just use a regular screw, which offers infinity different settings, and you can pretty much force the tensions to be as equal as your sensors can possibly tell. The screws won't be perfectly equal, but if your sensors are not able to tell the difference between 2 unequally tensioned sides, then there's no point in correcting the difference. And one confession I have to make is that in order to make the faces of this cube as equally tensioned as I can, I've actually set a few faces to be one compression setting higher than others, which basically means that I have the same complaint as what Cubics had with his Gun XS review. Like, the preset tensions of the gear compressions are basically just not as uniform as you think. And Qi has actually taken note of this, and they attach a promise to the Tornado V2, which I assume also applies to the V3, that they use machinery to ensure the consistency of all the preset tensions that they give you. I've not really seen the same with the Tongyin V3, and I can't comment on the Gun XS since I don't have it. Annoyance with tensioning aside, once I set up this cube properly, it performs great. And even though I've said I'm not the biggest fan of hard, snappy magnets, I actually love this cube's magnet strength when it's dialed to its weakest setting, and I pretty much see this as a good thing since I generally gravitate towards weaker magnets, and there are going to be lots of people out there with harder and snappier magnet preferences, and if you're one of those people, you can easily pick from the remaining 4 options. And what's left is just a very stable, reliable and smooth feeling cube with decent speed and low noise level, overall an enjoyable experience.